Good evening, everyone. So, since my last video, I got quite a number of questions about how can you protect your accounts online, right? We all use all sorts of different services, and so you want to make sure that you're safe. So I'm going to give my thoughts on a couple of ways you could do this. If I've missed out, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. So the first one is antiviruses. Now this is a very interesting one. I haven't used an antivirus in over 10 years. And the reason for this is my primary device is a Windows device and it is fully licensed. I run updates as soon as I get them. And that's the reason I don't need an antivirus. Now, I'm not the kind of people who just plug in random USB devices, but I spend a lot of time online. Here's my thought on antiviruses. 90% of all the PCs in the world run Windows, right? And a majority of the people who make malwares target Windows. So there's a higher chance that the people who created the OS would be able to detect that virus faster than a company that is just building antiviruses. Now remember, a lot of these antivirus companies do buy what are called virus definitions from Microsoft, and so as long as I set up the right in-house Windows updates and Windows Defender on my machine, and as long as I have a legitimate operating system, then I'm perfectly safe. Now the reason a lot of people get compromised is because a lot of people are running cracks, and what does a crack do? It turns off Windows updates. And so if Microsoft finds a malware out there and pushes an update to protect your machine, you fall out of that scope of the people who will get that update, and so that's the reason you're most likely to get attacked. So if you can, and I know not everybody can, but if you can get a legitimate copy of Windows, there's only probably 3 ways you can get it. Either it came with a machine, you get a retail copy, or it's a company subscription. Make sure all your software is updated. I know that update is big, but trust me, it saves you a lot of headaches, right? So keep updating your software. So that's the easiest way to avoid malware. So a lot of people talk about password managers. Now these are interesting softwares that help store all the millions and millions of passwords that we use every day, and so you could use this to generate a new password for every other account that you have on there. I used to use LastPass, but I haven't used it in a while. If you have an iPhone or a MacBook, you probably have Keychain. I moved all my passwords and all my multi-factor authentication stuff off to the Microsoft Authenticator because it gives me one app with all those features. So if that works for you, try that. But you could use those as many password managers out there. Just be careful not to forget your master password, because then that means you lose all your credentials. Now the reason I'm a bit hesitant to use password managers is there's chances that the company that you trust with all your passwords might end up in a data breach. And there's been a number of them out there, so you can go read a lot of cybersecurity news. And so if your password ends up in the pool of the data breaches that happen, and that means your passwords are compromised. So there's an interesting site called Have I Been Pawned, which will give you an idea if your email has been part of a data breach. So that's the reason I'm not the biggest fan of password managers, but by all means go use them. I talked about in my last video multi-factor authentication, right? And so as I mentioned, you could do this in multiple ways. So most platforms will give you an authenticator app, or will send you an SMS or ask you to verify using another recovery email, or some will give you recovery codes, or some will give you physical security keys. So there's quite a number of ways different platforms do multi-factor authentication. What I've done personally is try and keep all of my authenticator codes on one app, and then that way it's easy for me to manage. So you could do that, or you could get physical security keys like the YubiKey and just use that as a multi-factor authentication. Now, some businesses do use what are called biometric scanners or physical cards. So in my old job, we used to have our badges, our work badges would have a chip on it, and you could use that as a third factor authentication. Or if you use Windows Hello on these new modern devices, they all have infrared cameras and they can do facial recognition. That's all part of multi-factor authentication. So if you have one of those options, please use them. But the least you can do is turn it on for your accounts, have your accounts verified by a text message or a recovery code, at least at bare minimum. That doesn't cost you to do. So make sure you turn on multi-factor on all your important accounts. Now, another interesting strategy you could use is multiple email accounts or different emails for different things. Now, I probably have like 16 email accounts. Don't ask me why, but I have an account where I go sign if I'm browsing online and I need to sign up for something, or some website insists that I have to sign in to use a service. I have an email account that I use for all that, so I don't use my primary emails for that. So I have my primary emails, I use it for services that I know and that I trust, and so if it's any information that's confidential, that goes to my primary email. But then if it's all these online newsletters or whatever it is, I have an email account for all that. I have an email account for subscriptions, and there are very many interesting hacks that you could use different email accounts for. So the reason I have many email accounts is because I support a lot of different companies to do different things. So I end up setting an email account for all that. Now, the reason a lot of people get compromised is because we fall for phishing attacks, and essentially these are attacks designed to impersonate something. So, if you're in the world of cryptocurrency, I know one of the phishing attacks that happens a lot is people create email accounts that look like Coinbase but are not really Coinbase. So every time you get an email asking you to change your password or log in somewhere and you're not too sure if you need to, please check the address of the email, and that make sure that it is the domain of that email it is from the company, and you can verify that, right? Whatever it is, if it's facebook.com, make sure you verify the domain of the email where it's coming from. And especially any email asking you to change your password or that you've been compromised, check twice. Make sure it is a legitimate one. This is the biggest way people get compromised. And once I compromise your email, then I have access to all sorts of things. Now, some people tell you to use VPNs. I'm not the biggest fan of VPNs. They are necessary, and especially if you're in a business scenario. If you have a company and you have information that you really need to protect from the public internet, I suggest that you get your users to use a VPN. But for us consumers, most of us use VPNs to get past, content blockers like Netflix, and you want to watch shows from a different area. But, I'm not the biggest fan of VPNs. They do serve some level of protection, but they cost money. And there's no guarantee that VPN company is not sharing your data or using your data for all sorts of things. There's no guarantee unless you're crazy like me, who has a server back there and you've built your own network and your own VPN, and you can just get crazy like me. If you're interested in knowing how to set all that stuff up, let me know in the comments. Now, the last thing I'll talk about today is smart devices. There is a growing number of smart devices that end up in our houses. So if you have Alexa, I probably have triggered one of them, or Google Home, or any smart cameras, smart lights, you want to be really careful of what smart devices you buy, because that could be an easy avenue for attackers to access anything in your house, right? So you want to understand if your IoT devices only share information on your local network, or they go up to a cloud service, and if it's a cloud service, where's that going to? Now, there's a brilliant TikToker who tests out a bunch of these devices. I'll try and find his videos and link them up, but be careful what smart devices you buy and how much information they're collecting on your network. So if you're techie like me, I have 2 networks in my house. I have all my smart devices on one and my PCs on a different network. And that way, if somebody gets access to one of my smart devices, they probably can't get all through to my laptop, because that's where a lot of information is. But remember, people can use smart devices to do weird things like spy on you and figure out what you're doing in your house and when you're not there. And so be careful what smart devices you buy. Now, I am no cybersecurity expert. I am just a power user of technology. I love tinkling with all sorts of devices and all sorts of services. So don't take my experiences for the gospel truth.